Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another round of Your Puckin' Business with your host, Jeffrey Prince.
Thank you, Dougie Sticks. Coming to you, as always, from the beautiful studios of Undefeated Media here in Bergen County, New Jersey. This is the Mind Your Pucking Business podcast, brought to you, of course, by our good friends, the Bamboozle Project, as well as DraftKings. We encourage you to check out the Bamboozle Project at thebamboozleproject.com. Use promo code MYPB and save yourself a whopping 20% off your total order, which is good. You can listen to us across various platforms today. That is on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and iTunes. Was iTunes the one I left out there? I said it in a different order, and I mixed myself
everywhere.
And I mixed myself up. This is episode 158, Ciento Cincuenta y Ocho. So we appreciate you tuning in if you're using the Spanish feature on the on your feature today. How are you, sir?
Your feature today? I'm great.
I'm good. We've got like
sip of that iced tea.
We've got like static in the ear. I've got one headphone working. It's one of those days here. Yes. But we are live, and we appreciate you joining in. And a lot to talk about today. You know, this is the first time that we've been on, actually, if you think about it, which is kind of amazing, since mid-September of 2023. So if you're on like a school year calendar, this is the first time we have been not had like actual Ranger games to talk about or break down in 9 months, which is remarkable. You could have been pregnant and had a baby, and we've had every week of your 40-week pregnancy would have had stuff to talk about. So it's a little bit different today as we shift now really into
It was a great fun run.
It was. And there will be a clip, not that you know this, but it was a good segue that there will be a clip going up probably later this week on Instagram of, was that fun run a successful season, right, or not?
Up for debate.
By the way, are you having any audio issues in the headphones?
A little bit, but Brian, do you hear these issues?
I've got one headphone working here today. Okay.
I don't think it's a live issue. I think it's a headphone.
No,
issue.
I know it's a headphone
issue.
issue.
If you guys at home are hearing anything weird, please let us know in the comment section.
Thanks. All right, so here's what we're going to try and do as we kick off the New York Rangers 2024 summer offseason. What I want to do is I want to like try and take a step back, right? And instead of looking at things directly into getting into it, I want to go like on the surface first. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and this might be a dumb way to look at this. And if it is dumb, you can tell me and it's fine. I'm not going to be offended, but this was my starting point. I said I wanted to do something very elementary in my head yesterday, and then I had to look it up last night and do it, although it took about a total of 20 seconds to do it. I wanted to look back at the 82-game regular season. And then I wanted to say to myself, okay, how many – well, we just fixed whatever the headphone issue was. But here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to look at how many goals are the Rangers scoring per game? How many goals are they letting up per game? And I'm going to use that as a barometer over the course of an 82-game season, because obviously the sample size is impressive. And I'm then going to take that and use that going forward, at least as my starting point. So, all right, simple math. Again, my wife, Jenny from the block, is the math teacher, but this is math that I'm capable of doing. The Rangers over the 82-game season averaged 3.26 goals a game, okay? Against, on the other side, goals coming into our net, the Rangers averaged 2.43. So that's a pretty big difference, right? I mean, it's almost a full goal a game. Then ESPN or NH, I think it was ESPN, which is what I used to get the stats, also conveniently had a column next to this about goal differential. How many more goals did a team score in the season versus how many they let up? The Rangers were plus 68. Then I thought to myself, all right, let me scroll down out of curiosity with all the other good teams that were in the league, and there were a lot, right? Dallas, Vancouver out west. We know the teams in the East that were good. How does the plus 68 goal differential compare against the other 31 NHL franchises? Okay. And I was shocked to find that the Rangers had the best in the league, was highest in the league. No team had a higher goal differential than the Rangers did, which was plus 68 on the season. So why did I do that? Why did I want to go and use this as my statistical breakdown or how I was going to start the offseason? Because I've never done this before.
Yeah.
And I was driving yesterday
Mm-hmm.
in between clients and my real job. And it was really, I was on Route 46 for those in the Northeast that know where we are.
Yeah.
And I was driving and I said, this is what I'm going to use because I want to go back to like I want my starting point to be super, super elementary and beginner level and then go from there. So what do I take from this? Okay. I take from this that over an 82 game regular season, which you're going to have again next year, and we can talk about the playoffs and their importance, and you'd be absolutely right. However, the caveat to making the playoffs is you need to have a good regular season, or then, of course, the playoffs don't matter. And as Ranger fans, we all know this because we've had plenty of years, whether that be the late 90s, the early 2000s, or as recently as 2018 to 2022, where the Rangers didn't even make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that you can't take it for granted when you get there.
Yes.
So what do I take from that? Well, obviously, this is not just an Igor discussion in the 2.43. No, it's not, because the regular season numbers, of course, twofold, actually, to your argument you were going to make me. One, Jonathan Quick had a lot to do with that because he played in a lot of games.
True.
And Igor Shesterkin in the regular season never played as dominant as well as he did in the postseason. Yeah. So let's take the defensive number here first, the 2.43, because it's probably easier to do that. They're not going to make any changes in goal, right? Igor Shesterkin's under contract for next year. We can get in a discussion, and we might today about, do you re-sign him at this astronomical number that's going to cripple your cap for years? Is it worth it? Arguments could be made either way. So defensively, and Jonathan Quick is back because he signed a 1-year extension. So going into the year that 2.43 should be somewhat similar, okay? Now, if I take the other half of it, which is the goals for 3.26, this is where it gets a lot more complex, okay? And that is where we start to talk about the offseason, and this is my lead-in point to get away from that elementary surface and dig a little bit deeper in the 2.6 goals per game, right? At the end of the season, okay, offense was not, if we go back 7 weeks, and with what we've been through in the playoffs, it's hard to do that. But you've got to now think, okay, let's just think regular season. When you found out in that last day and you beat Ottawa at home that Monday night, I think it was April 15th, and you moved on, and the next night you found out you were playing Washington, were you really concerned with the offensive output you had seen to date in the previous 6.5 months in the regular season? No, you were not. You were not. You had Artemi Panarin having an all-world year. You had Zibanejad playing well. You had, obviously, Lafreniere growing and all of that stuff, right? But the question is now, if you move the core, which is a post that we put up last week that got a lot of controversy either way. There were some people that were passionately for what I said, and there were some people, trust me, that were passionately against what I said. And I'm fine with that. That's the whole reason of debate. I like that. I'd rather there be two sides than one side. But if you move the core, right? So if you sit here and you're in the argument where you say, I'm going to make some catastrophic change because I believe that when they get to the postseason next April, they need to be more physical and they need better postseason players. Am I affecting that 3.26 goals per game number? And the answer is yes, you probably are, right? If I said, and this is very easy, I never looked at this, and you can correct me in any of these live chats right now if I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume I'm right. If I had to take one player that was statistically the most responsible for getting that 3.26 number to that number, it's Artemi Panarin, right? So if I pull him away, and this is what we discussed last year in the offseason when everyone wanted Panarin gone with how terrible he was in the Devil series, and he was terrible, right? There's no two ways about it. But if you take Artemi Panarin away, you need to then replace his production. You need to then find someone that maybe isn't going to get you 130 or 140 points like he will, but you can't just assume collectively that those 140 points are going to be gobbled up by someone that's on your roster, because it's not, right? And you need those points to get you into the playoffs.
So one thing you said, I remember in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, is that he's scoring these points against bad teams.
So Artemi Panarin, now, like Sports 101, you don't control who you play, right? I don't make the schedule, because if I made the schedule, you'd play the worst team every night and you'd be 82-0, but you don't. Artemi Panarin, and there's nothing wrong with this, and he should be doing this, by the way, if you're that elite, does have a tendency to gobble up defenses. But Panarin, and I thank Adam for his comment on Instagram right now, isn't the problem to me, right? Now, I could the counter argument, because again, there's two sides to every story, and you have to keep that in mind, is the player performance has been lacking for sure. But it's a problem. It's a problem if he wasn't here, because that is an awful lot of points to replace. And remember, like, if you're going to say that somebody should be in the Hart Trophy discussion, which is the MVP of the league discussion, if you're going to trade away an MVP, it's going to have obviously ramifications, especially on that 3.26 goals for number. So, here's the other thing I was thinking yesterday, and this is where maybe I didn't do the best job of conveying this last week when I said what I said. Questioning whether you're going to move the core, okay, does not automatically assume action that you are going to then do it. I'm merely phrasing it as a question. Should they go out and do it? Not should they go out and do it and let's do it. Should they do it? Take those pros and cons and then take the appropriate action. But I don't want you to think that like it's an automatic assumption. Well, if you're questioning moving the core, you automatically are going to remove the core, because there's plenty of logical reasons you could give to not move the core. Okay. So if the other thing that I was thinking is that the window, so like the first show that we ever did, okay, and we talked about this last week, no one was watching. You and I sat, the tables were different, and like we had to be far away because it was COVID, it was 2020. And I used the term that day, which still 158 episodes later, we still talk about a lot, which is window of opportunity, right? And I've been lucky that when I said in 2020 that this team probably had a 5 to 7 year window coming up, 4 years later, that assumption is probably still correct. However, eventually you have people or players, Brennan Hoffman, Gabe Perreault, Adam Sikora, Berard, all of these guys are eventually going to show up and make an NHL roster. I don't necessarily know that it's 2024, 2025 for any of them. It might be. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But here's the other reason you need to keep in mind that some of these faces are going to eventually show up, because of the cap mess that this team is in. And these players will cost a lot less, right? So eventually, not only does the window close, but the main characters, if you will, you start to see a shift that other main characters kind of start out with not maybe a leading role in some of those four names I just mentioned, but you're going to eventually see them be on the team. So you keep that in mind. And also, that's the sort of thing you keep in mind when you're discussing Igor Shesterkin. Like Igor Shesterkin, and I don't blame him for saying this, right? Because sports is a business. These athletes play professional sports for 10 or 15 years, and then, God willing, they have 60 years of their life to live, right? So they've got to maximize and make the money they need to make. But if you saw last week at Exit Day, which is, something that happens in all sports, when you have a team season ends and, like 2 or 3 days later, they come to clean out the locker and the media is there in their face asking them questions. And when Igor Shesterkin was asked about, hey, do you want to finish your career in New York? What are your thoughts on your next contract? Because he only has 1 year left. His response was this: I don't speak English. So I can understand that. And some of the chats, some of the things I'm seeing in the chat, you can't trade Mika for Brady Tkachuk. Mika has a no movement clause. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but this is what we're going to get into in a minute, is trying to look at some of these nuances in between. So Igor Shesterkin, this is a very hard discussion to have, because there is an emotional aspect of Igor Shesterkin that when you saw him at, I guess it was only 10 days ago in Florida, when the team lost 2-1 and you saw Trocheck go over and give him a hug, you felt awful for Igor Shesterkin, because in the last 6 weeks, this was an example of a player that literally gave you everything he could possibly give a team. Like, I mean, he couldn't give anything else. The problem is this: if you keep Igor Shesterkin, and again, he's here next year, so the discussion is really a 2025 and beyond issue. But and I see some people are writing on Instagram about this on both sides. If you keep Igor Shesterkin beyond the contract and you give him $12 million a year, the problem is there is a salary cap in this sport, and it will then prohibit you from paying other players on your team that you would need to, let's say, make your whole team whole, right? If I were to go out and do that, I'm also signing a goalie that I believe is 29 right now. So he's going to be 30 in a year. The length of that contract, I'm sure Igor Shesterkin's agent is going to say to himself, look, we're getting a 5 or 6 year deal because I know this is your last contract. And so I want to maximize what I can earn for my player and give him a full deal, right? So if I go out and do that, I am concerned for sure that I have a player that is in the downside of his career. Now, downside doesn't mean that he's terrible either, right? Downside doesn't mean, Igor Shesterkin at 34 is going to be the equivalent of Dan Blackburn back in 1999. No, it's not saying that. Simply what I'm saying is you just have to keep in mind it's not necessarily a gimme, as we've been seeing with what you guys have been telling us, that you're automatically going to resign him. Like I've seen some people say, well, you give him a blank check. And if you give him a blank check, just so you understand what you're saying there is this. Igor Shesterkin can sign for whatever he wants, cripple your salary cap, and now I have a goalie that's on the downside of his career, and I don't have the money or the resources to fill the other roster spots around him. That is a concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is Jonathan Quick playing well last year, helping your cause?
Jonathan Quick has one more year here. If Jonathan Quick hasn't, so Jonathan Quick, when he was signed here, and that's a very good question, Jonathan Quick came here on a 1-year deal. Let's not get into whether people liked it or not. If you go back to the clips, I was for it. There were plenty of people that were against it. It's not the point. The point is he was here to be here for 1 year. He had such a good year, and he was so needed because he was also able to give Igor rest, which you saw how valuable that was in the playoffs. So he's back for another year. But to sit here and think to myself that he's going to be here longer than a year, I'm not sure that that's realistic. I'd love to be wrong, right? Like, let him do again next year and let him decide, hey, you know what? I've got another year in me. I can do this for a third straight year. Great. I mean, where would we sign? At the veteran minimum? Of course. Why not? Back up whatever your starting goalie is. But you just have to, like, the Igor situation is tough it's not, like, you have to take your emotions out of it. And that, again, like I said before, just because you're debating something doesn't mean you're saying in the end you're going to do it. I'm not saying do not sign Igor, let him walk and go to the Devils, for example, where our executive producer, B-Rock, over there in the corner in his Devils gear would love it. He would love it, right?
Yeah.
But I just think you have to remember that this is a business and you have a salary cap in this sport. It's different. Like and I'm going to go down a road I hate to go down, baseball, right? Because we get in trouble when we talk baseball here. People don't like it. But I'm a Yankee fan. My wife and I, we would go to Yankee games all the times before we had kids. Being a Yankee fan was great because there was no salary cap. You didn't have to think like that. Although the MLB now has a luxury tax, but there was no salary cap. And this is a different thing. And so you also, I don't know if you're going to re-sign Igor, right? You're definitely not better off. Like if Chris Drury is sitting here saying to himself, I'm going to take the emotions out of it, which he will because he's a general manager, but I still think he's the best fit for this team. You want to do it in this offseason. You don't need to go into the year with him being in the UFA at the end of the season because you're going to hear about it all the time. And that's just a distraction he's not going to need. And chances are, like if I was betting, and I usually, I am the biggest pessimist ever, but if I'm being realistic, I guess, and I said to you that next season, Igor is a free agent. He has the same team back, so he's playing for his next contract. What kind of season do you think Igor's going to have?
Not a good one.
No, he's going to have a really good one.
You think so?
Of course, yes.
A lot of pressure on that season.
Yes, but normally someone like him, he would play well because he's earning his money.
He's going to want even more money.
But that's the risk in not signing him now.
Yes.
We'll take some Instagram comments on this. Just an FYI, Bob in Florida makes $10 million and they are a cup contender. Very good point by Adam, right? We need grit and toughness and meanness, not only a goaltender. That is true. We will get into that in a minute. And then is Igor pricing himself out of New York? Does he not believe in NYR anymore since they failed him repeatedly? That's a good question. Here's the, And Antoinette, thank you for joining us for the first time on Instagram. I know you're usually a YouTube watcher, but here's the thing with the best possible scenario, and I don't think it's going to happen, but you want, like, what would the best thing? We all want Igor here, but we want him here at an amount that's not going to cripple the cap. The best situation, and Chris is watching, so Chris can actually tell us if this is really an accurate thing that could actually happen. But if Igor comes back, it is at a reduced fair market value price, because his fair market value is, let's be real.
We're not giving a blank check.
No, you can't give any player a blank check.
We're not making him the highest paid NHL player, is what you're saying.
No, you're gonna try not to. Chris Drury's argument. Yeah. If I'm in the negotiations, which I have nothing to do with, and I don't have any real experience in that, and I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But if I'm if I'm Chris Drury, part of my argument is you are now, if this next contract is 5 or 6 years in length, which is probably what I would think Igor's going to want. I would say 4 would be a minimum if I'm Igor's agent, but I'm going for more. You're now going into the backside of your career. You have to price yourself accordingly. So hopefully there would be a situation where Igor would say, you know what? I want to be in New York. I have a chance to win here. My best friend is the goaltender for the Islanders in Sorokin. I can stay close to him because he isn't going anywhere. And I'll take maybe a little bit of a hometown discount. Doesn't mean that I am not setting my family up for life, but that's what I would do if I was them with Igor. I would approach it, and I think it's got to be in this offseason where you're approaching it now, because I do think with any player, if you go into a season where a guy is a bona fide all-star, which Igor is, and you're going into it where he is going to be an unrestricted free agent, you're going to hear about it all season long, and that is not something you want. If you look at the unrestricted free agents on this team, right? So these are people, just because we have some new listeners, I'm going to go elementary. I'm going to go 101 here. An unrestricted free agent can just walk. Someone can go on July 1st or whatever the date is. It's probably July 1st where the free agency opens, and say, hey, you played for the Rangers last year. You're now an unrestricted free agent. Here's my offer to you. It's 2 year, whatever it may be. So there's 5 players that have no contractual obligation whatsoever to Chris Drury and the Rangers, right? Blake Wheeler, Alex Wenberg, Jake Roslovic, Eric Gustafson, and Chad Ruhwedel. Let's go one by one. Blake Wheeler.
What's your favorite player?
My favorite player. Blake Wheeler, to me, I'm gonna go back on some of the things I've said. All right. If Blake Wheeler, if there is a spot and the team says that there is a spot for him on the 4th line at the absolute veteran minimum, and we have the room with the cap, I am okay with it. I'm also okay if Blake Wheeler decides to retire. If some other NHL GM wants to do something stupid, and I don't know, based on what they saw this year, that they would do this, and offer him more money than he deserves, he can walk. Blake Wheeler can walk. Alex Wenberg, I don't remember who I was talking to. It was someone last night at my hockey game in my beer league that I play in. Actually, I know who it was. I'm not going to mention names. Said to me, as we were talking in the locker room about this, and talked about Alex Wenberg, and thought he was great, thought he was a wonderful addition to the team. And I had my son next to me in the locker room, so I couldn't be like, what are you freaking talking about? And I said, okay. Alex Wenberg, to me, can walk. I haven't seen anything from him that I can't duplicate by getting a third-line center somewhere else on the free agent market. Alex Wenberg is also, if I had to guess, I would like to be Alex Wenberg, because there probably is some general manager that is going to overpay for him. He can leave. Roslovic, and thanks for the comment on YouTube, Chris, for discussing who it was. Roslovic.
Yes.
Can leave. Roslovic, to me, you would notice him 1 out of 10 shifts. He would make a good play and put himself into scoring position, and then just completely disappear for the next 9 shifts. Roslovic didn't work here. If you even want to give me an argument that Roslovic worked here, I don't even know how to even argue the other way in your defense. He can leave. Eric Gustafson is an interesting scenario. So we're going to now bring in, so Eric Gustafson was your 6th defenseman, right? So do you turn around over your back shoulder and say, is there someone coming up that could take his position, right? Zachary Jones, my other favorite player. I personally, Gustafsson to me is definitely a liability in the defensive end to an extent. But if you told me I was bringing him back as my sixth defenseman at a lower price, if he was willing to do or take less, I'm not totally against it. I'm not. I like Roslovic is almost like a Wheeler. If you want to take a fair price, I can live with it, right? But if Roslovic also gets overpaid by some general manager in Columbus or not Arizona, Utah or Vegas, and they want to take him and overpay him, he's your problem now. He's fine. Like, we thank you for your service on Broadway. It was okay. Move on, right? Yeah. Chad Ruhwedel. Now, I got in a discussion before we went live today with Chris and Nikolai, okay? So we have, and probably... So I have a regret with them. So we decide, Chris and Nikolai, who will comment on everything, they know as much as anyone, right? And they even know more than me, right? I'll even say it. So we created this MYPB group chat, which you know, and it goes off all the time. And now there's issues with like people saying political stuff and like, which we don't need, was not the point of it. I almost wish what I could do was to find like a derivative of that and get a group chat where it was just Chris and Nikolai and everyone could just watch and not contribute and annoy, because like you would like to watch their debate. And anyway, my point is this. We had a debate before we went live, Chris, Nikolai, and I, about Chad Ruhwedel, right? Now, okay, let's go back. Trade deadline day, March 8th, Chris Drury decides, literally 2:30, 30 minutes before the deadline. I'm gonna trade a 4th round pick for Chad Ruhwedel. Now, hindsight is 2020. I get that, right? So the argument is, which is what Chris is going to make, is that, look, you needed him for depth. Trouba wasn't 100% at the time. Giving up a 4th round pick for Chad Ruhwedel made sense. And you know what? That's fine. I can live with that. However, and I understand hindsight's 2020, Chad Ruhwedel never dressed. No one would even know who he is. He never played a game. And he is now an unrestricted free agent. So I don't think they're going to go and re-sign him. Now, also, you wasted a 4th round pick. Now, do 4th round picks guarantee that they turn out well? No, especially with this organization and the drafting history of the Rangers. But I would have liked to at least take a flyer on a 4th round pick rather than just saying Chad Ruhwedel will be here just to get water for the team, and that's about it. So Chad, or Adam's correcting me, he played 1 game. Actually, you know what? I tend to remember that. I think it was a home game now that I think about it. So he played 1 game, but he can leave also. So here's my recap on the UFAs. Wheeler, if it's a minimum and it's 4th line, I can live with it. Wenberg can leave. Roslovic could leave. Gustafsson is the same as Wheeler, where if you can sign him for a lower price, but I do think Gustafsson's going to find some stupid GM that's going to overpay him, and Chad Ruhwedel can leave. Now we get a little bit. Now we got to make some tougher decisions, okay? And why don't we pull up some comments here? Nikolai's depth, yes, but you have Jones, who was improving so much that Jeff said Jones has been looking good of late. That is true. Jones had gotten better, but I still stand by Nikolai what I said, and that is that if you look at Zach Jones, and this is just sheerly cosmetic, if I don't even look at him with a stick in his hand or skates on his feet, he's just so skinny to me to be an NHL defense. He's not big enough to be an NHL defenseman. Like I don't see it. So, all right, here we go with the RFAs. Yes. Capo Caco. Okay. Capo Caco. I at what point, right? Like, at what point do you say what I bought or what I thought I was getting at the store is just not what I'm getting? We joked about before today. Here's a good comparison. We joked before we went live today because you were having car issues right now. And we were talking about my car last year. My car was not an ugly car. It was a nice car, but it had a million problems, right? And you were joking with me that I milked the system to an extent, and I would keep loaner cars longer than I should because I didn't want to go, but they had to fix my car, but I didn't want to go back to my car, right? And the reason why is my car, I came to the conclusion that my car was not what I thought it was when I went and first got my car or when Capo Caco was first drafted. At some point, You sit there and you say, okay, we're going to get it back to what I thought it was going to be. Capo Caco is going to become the second overall pick. Okay, it didn't work out under David Quinn. All right, let's get another coach. Okay, now let's get another coach in Peter Laviolette. It's not working. And at what point do you just sit there and say, okay, I need to come to the conclusion that what I thought I was getting or what I thought I was buying is not what I have. And I'm at that point. I am now at the point where if Chris Drury decides that Capo Caco can leave, you know what? Okay, it's time. It's time. Like, it is now definitively time for me to say it's time to move on. And Capo Caco is a restricted free agent. If you told me, do you think a simple yes or no, Capo Caco is back on the New York Rangers? No, he's not. Because, what do we think is going to happen now? It's been, what, five seasons?
That was my question. 2019, it looks like?
Yeah. We think that all of a sudden in 2025, playing with the same people, the same organization, the light bulb is going to go off. It's not. And it sucks. Like, it sucks to come to that conclusion. But Capo Caco can leave this team. He can. Like, it's not working. It took me a while, and I didn't want to come here and ever come to that conclusion, but he can leave.
So what are you going to get for him?
A bag of peanuts. I don't know, but it's not working. And the trade value, and I shouldn't have said that to you. The trade value for him is not that high. Okay. Now
he hasn't done jack since he's been in the league.
Now, Nikolai's point on YouTube is Capo Caco will turn into a second pick on his next team, and he probably will. Yeah, he will probably go to LA or Anaheim and play with, dare I say, Trevor Zegras, because they'll like that, and blossom into the player that we all thought. But I need to look at it as just here, right? Yeah. And it's not. It's just, look, it's just not working. You
can't keep him on the basis that he might be good somewhere else. If it's not working here, you can't just hold on to him just because he might be a good player.
Right. He's not. And his trade value, unfortunately, because he has not in those 5 years, is extraordinarily low. But he's also taking up, even if you signed him for a contract here that worked, he's still playing here and taking up a spot and not being productive. Yeah. So there's that problem as well. So he can go. Two other restricted free agents in the offseason, Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider. I would like to keep them both. I think Ryan Lindgren, I think there's a clip of this, maybe it was from last season or earlier this season, where I said it and I stand by it. He is one of the most undervalued and underappreciated Rangers that there is. Doesn't mean he is the most productive. Doesn't mean that you couldn't live without him, because if you couldn't live without him, you would definitely wouldn't be getting rid of him. But I think the way he plays, and we know that this team lacks a physical capability or physical mindset, which has been the New York Rangers problem forever. Ryan Lindgren is that guy. I think you need him here. Braden Schneider is a young defenseman. I understand you could talk about the breakaway in Game 1 versus Florida where he missed, but that's not a defenseman's role. Braden Schneider is a young defenseman. I'd like to keep him here, and it shouldn't be the sort of thing that signing him would prohibit you to signing other people. So that's what I would do with the UFA. With the RFA. So I would get rid of Caco. I would keep Lindgren and Schneider. So as a whole free agency recap, Blake Wheeler can stay at a minimum if he's on a minimum contract. Wenberg is gone. Roslovic is gone. Gustafsson can stay on a very cheap deal. Ruedel is gone. Caco is gone. And Lindgren and Schneider can stay.
So with all these players gone, are you freeing up cap space? And
you're not freeing up a lot, but you brought up a good point. You ready?
Yeah.
Jacob Trouba. What do you do with Jacob Trouba?
Well, I already see people in the chat. But
Are they?
I'll let you get there. Because doesn't he have a C on his chest?
He does.
Well, people are saying in the chat, give Lindy a C.
Jacob Trouba is an example. Here's what Jacob Trouba is. If I was a judge and I had to take one law class in college and it didn't go well, so I am as far from a judge as you can be. But if I'm a judge and you sat here and I said, you argue to me why they should keep Trouba, and you argue for me why you shouldn't keep Trouba and the ways you could keep him or not keep him, whatever. you would have it would actually be a compelling trial, right?
Okay.
So it actually, like, to me, would be the sort of thing where you could argue both ways. I'm gonna give you my opinion, but I'm gonna tell you the one reason that's gonna slant the opinion for me in the way that I'm going.
Okay.
This team, as alluded to a little bit before today, well, earlier today, it has some serious cap issues, okay, that need to be addressed. Yes, he was playing with a broken ankle. I see that on Instagram, and I give the guy credit for doing that. However, if you're playing on a broken ankle, I'd almost rather someone playing with an ankle that's not broken, okay? Here's my decision. I've thought about this for a week with Jacob Trouba, and I've gone back and forth, but I think if you want me to reach my conclusion, here it is. They have such salary cap issues that if there is some way to get rid of Jacob Trouba with the condition that as I am getting rid of him, I am freeing up cap space because Lafreniere's got to get paid. Igor's got to get paid, right? These RFAs, the RFAs right now in Lindgren and Schneider, I would like to get paid. If there is a way to get rid of him and also by doing so free up cap space, I think that's the answer I want to do. I don't ever remember a team having a captain, especially a New York Rangers team, where there is such like derisive hate towards him.
Well, I feel like his body language wasn't very he didn't look like a captain. He didn't look like he was leading. He didn't look like he was inspired.
Well, he also led through that round, and he might still now led the NHL in penalties. Look, if you're a captain of your team, you can't be leading the league in penalties. It doesn't really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So Jacob Trouba, to me, and it will be very interesting to see what they do if you can get rid of him in some form. And Utah has a ton of cap space. I've seen that mentioned, where you're freeing up cap space that you'll need to allocate for other players. I'm not against it. Now, if you told me Jacob Trouba is back here in September at training camp, would I blow a fuse and be mad? No, I wouldn't. But I think if there's a way that they can live without Jacob Trouba. If anybody says to me, and I'll throw this out for people that are watching right now, was this team success in the regular season? How much of that success was because of Jacob Trouba, right? Could you replicate that success next year if Jacob Trouba wasn't here? I would tend to think the answer is you could.
Okay. Now, if he is here, do you want him leading your team?
Well, they're not going to strip him of his captaincy. They would never do that.
Yeah.
If Jacob Trouba's here, he's the captain, because it's an awful look to say, hey, you know what? We were thinking of getting rid of you in the offseason. We couldn't do so. We're going to keep you here, but we're going to take the C off your chest. If Jacob Trouba here, he's the captain of the team. Now, you could say, well, they don't ever strip people's captaincies. Oh, yes, they do. Blake Wheeler 2 years ago, ironically, in Winnipeg, had that happen to him. But it's not happening here. And I'm not saying he's deserving of having his captaincy stripped, right? But if there's a way you could get rid of him, I don't think you're missing that much on the ice, especially at what he's getting paid, that you could then turn around and say to yourself, you know what, I'm freeing up the cap space. And Captain Matt on Instagram leads with it. He leads. Yes, he does lead. He leads with his elbow. That is true. That is a very good one. And Captain Matt should be mentioned today on the show. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
So we talk about, because we look, it's depressing. This episode, last week's episode, it's depressing to do because we're talking about unexpiring hockey. But Captain Matt is the captain of the beer league team that I play, and that we do talk about occasionally. Last night, we won the whole thing. It's definitely not me. Not yet. The team, not me. Please come watch a game and you'll know it's not me. So we do give Matt credit for leading. Now, we talk about off-season discussions. Back in the winter, we lost. We lost in the semis to a team we should have absolutely beat. Terrible, right? And we needed to add 2 spots to our team. Captain Matt found 2 very good players, one no one even heard of. And those 2 players, I would say, in comparison to Trouba, were far more responsible for the team's overall success than Jacob Trouba would ever be. So we give credit to Captain Matt today on leading the Ultimate Warriors, his Ultimate Warriors, that I'm lucky enough to play on. Yeah. Now, those 2 players are one and done. They're leaving. Oh. So now he has to go back to the drawing board.
Money elsewhere.
He's got money to spend elsewhere. Now, you would think if Matt could get it right twice, does he then get an assistant job, like an assistant GM job in the league? like, in the NHL.
Yeah.
It really could.
Deserves it.
I mean, he was an MVP general manager.
Yeah.
You have James O'Brien, MVP, leading the league with like 1,000 more assists than anyone. And James O'Brien scores the game-winning goal to clinch it last night. So a lot of really good Ultimate Warrior stories there.
Get called up.
Wouldn't be me. Wouldn't be me. So those are some, I guess, on the surface, stuff. Topic. You want to pull up Chris's comment because I'll address that. So Chris is saying that Captain Matt, yes, scratched me for a game in the playoffs like my name was Kako last week. I didn't play in the semifinal game. Truth be told, the only reason I didn't play last Wednesday was because my daughter had her middle school concert at the same time. Now, I almost played because I was a healthy scratch, but I almost played. There was a chance because my daughter last week got braces earlier in the week and was like miserable for a day. And she's in chorus, the middle school chorus, which total, I don't even need to get into it. She doesn't want to be into it and he doesn't want to do it. But you know what? You've been there. You're in the concert. I'm going to be there. Yeah. It was looking like for a little bit, she wasn't going to go because of, her braces, couldn't open her mouth, which, is kind of a prerequisite to being able to sing. So it looked like there was a chance I was going to play in that game. I didn't, but the only reason I was scratched and didn't play was I was taken out of the lineup.
Lower body injury.
Lower body injury.
Let me ask you this before you get too far away from it with Trouba. If you do get rid of him, what do you get for him? Or what would you want?
I would think that's a great question. Chris, if he's still watching, can answer this. My thought would be that this is an addition by subtraction. You're not going, you will not bring back a major roster piece. This move is made with the intentions of salary cap relief. Okay. I think that is 100% what you are doing.
So you're not getting an all-star, but are you addressing the right wing issue? Are you you're getting maybe a mid-tier position player?
You will not bring back a top line right wing, even though that would be great if you could. You're not. There's no way. I would think that you get a role player. You're getting a role player. Yeah. And Chris, I am not paying a first and a second in Othman or Perot to get rid of Trouba, because if that's what the asking price was for Jacob Trouba, then you're finding a way to keep him, right? He can play. It can be here, but he's not. But he's not. Don't get me started on Gabe Perreault. So the Rangers offseason will begin in 2.5 weeks. I believe now we kind of start to go into our MYPB summer mode. I'm not 100% sure if we're on next week. We'll be on either next week or the week after. I am away the first week of July, and then we'll be kind of back into like offseason mode. But those are some of the in-roster, in-house questions. Then, of course, you ask yourself, you got to look at what other players are out there that were not a New York Ranger that you can bring in. Is it Sam Reinhart, right? Well, it would love to be Sam Reinhart, but I don't really know that you can afford Sam Reinhart, especially with the cap issues.
Maybe since we don't know what the schedule's like, maybe we put out, maybe you ask the question, what is on your wish list of players for next season?
We could do that. We will do a post. Speaking of our post, we did a post that had 100-something comments the other night about untouchables, right? Who on the Rangers is untouchable? Meaning, who is like, if I'm Chris Drury and I get a phone call from another GM, I don't even listen to the offer if you want this player from me. And the only one that really had consistent vote, there were a lot that had votes, but that was clearly far and away was also the one we just discussed in Igor, which was that Trocheck was up there for sure. Lafreniere, which I think I'd have to think about to give you, and I thank you for the question. I'd have to give you my thoughts as to who would be my untouchables. Couple Instagram comments. Martin Nietzsche from Shore, sign him up from Carolina. He would be a good fit. Although I still think there's a chance Carolina will resign him. Stanley Cup Finals, real quick. Last night, Florida goes up 2-0. If you're into hockey, you should watch the Stanley Cup Finals regardless, right? But from watching most of these two games, I haven't watched it all, I'll be honest, but I've watched most of it. I think if you're even a casual hockey fan, you should be watching the Stanley Cup Finals. It is physical. It has gotten dirty. It has gotten 5-minute majors. You may see suspensions handed out today. The series shifts to Edmonton on Thursday night. And that is actually the first, I believe, someone can correct me. Well, let me think. Montreal was in the Stanley Cup Final in 2011 or 2021. So it's the first Stanley Cup Final game in Canada since then. But also back then they had those restrictions on amount of capacities with COVID. So I think this is, when was the last time before that a Canadian team was in the final? Was it 2011 with Vancouver? Or Ottawa? Yeah, I think it was Vancouver, right? 2011. So this will really be like the first legit Stanley Cup, full house in Canada game. And you have dirty play, you just have some like chippiness and bad blood already. Like it's a great series. Like you should be into it. It's frustrating. And Adam, who's commenting, texted me before the show about it. And I thought of this last night. I said this to my wife. Like if the Rangers had gotten past Florida, they probably were winning the cup, which is very frustrating now because you watch Florida up 2-0. And Edmonton is like, if you shut down their top players, there's just not a lot there. There really isn't. Like I'm watching this game last night. The guy that scored the goal between the legs of Bobrovsky that scored the first goal. It's like, I'm like, this is now going to become your goal scorer. Like the Rangers would have stopped that. So we shall see with that. Other than that, I thank you guys as always for your contributions. The offseason will give us not obviously in-game stuff to dissect, but there's plenty of discussion stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll have some clips coming up you'll want to comment on from the last few weeks. That is it for us. We thank the Bamboozle Project for their sponsorship. You can check out thebamboozleproject.com, promo code MYPB, save yourself 20% off. We thank DraftKings as well. We will keep you posted via our Instagram story as to our taping schedule, whether we're on next week or not, but we will be on before free agency opens for sure. And what we will do at that point is we also will take a look at outside the organizational options, like what teams were playing on other teams. Alfred Gallo, great show, guys. Don't trade Cooley. Cooley's not getting traded. I'd be shocked if Will Cooley gets traded, so you don't have to worry about that. So, and Nikolai's question, we'll pull it up. I don't know what the answer is, I'm afraid. What's one thing that separates Drury from having a good summer to a bad summer? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if he's asking that as an open-ended question, like he has the answer. The one thing that separates him from having a good summer from a bad summer. Capo Caco. Okay, there we go. We'll let Brent answer it. I'll take that answer because I like that. Brent with the answer of Capo Caco. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you next week or the week after.